Hi, on this Aristeia 99, we're going to talk about minions. So, before we get into Master of Puppets, we need to talk about the two new special rules they introduce. First off would be the rules for the controller, which is a type of character, and after that will be the rules for minions, because, well, controllers have minions. So if you go to aristeiathegame.com, they do have a wiki there, and by all means go check it out. That is a fantastic resource and is a great way to actually read all this, because I know some of you are better at reading or prefer to read. I normally prefer to read myself. So the Master of Puppets introduces two new characters, Fiddler and Gaia. They're both what are referred to as controllers. Controllers, as defined by the wiki, are the characters who may deploy their minions in the hexadome. Now, that's great, but there's a lot of bullet points underneath that. First off, the controller can only deploy their minions on free spaces. The controller cannot deploy their minions adjacent to any allied minions. Now this is actually really important because it means basically, no, you may not make a solid wall of minions. When you look at, say, Gaia, there's sort of an implied wall because of the disengage rolls, but you don't have that with Fiddler in the Jackbox. Next up would be the controller can remove one of their minions from the hexadome at any time during their action step for no action point cost and within any range. So if you have a minion that's way out of position, you can just say, okay, you're gone, you're out of here. And, well, there you go. That minion goes away. If a controller is placed in the infirmary, all their minions must be removed from the hexadome immediately. Without their controller, the minions don't really know what to do. After that, the controller may activate their minions to perform one of the action on the minion's card. So that's fairly self-explanatory. It should be noted that, at least at the moment, the minions don't actually seem to have energy costs on their card. It's usually activated some other way. So, worth keeping an eye on. And then the controller cannot have more minions deployed than listed on their card. So this is fairly important. There's a limit of them. So for instance, Fiddler can have 2 Vulcan Jackbots. And if you'll see at the top of her card, it's like, oh look, 1, 2. Okay, there you go. Gaia would be the same way. We do want to keep that in mind with her because she has the Gorgonians. What a wonderful thing. Now, instead of numbering them, they have their own little icons, basically. So that's what you're going to want to keep an eye out for. So Gaia can have up to 3, Fiddler can have up to 2. It'd be really cool if there was a controller that came out that only had 1 minion, but oh, what a minion it is. And that gives them some design room, I think, in the long term. So, that's great and all. What is a minion? It may sound obvious to some of you, but as always, there are rules associated with this. So, minions are a special type of obstacle. That's a fun thing. Controlled by the character who deployed them, called a controller. Now, minions may perform actions when activated by their controller. When performing any of these actions, the active player may play tactics, important, and activate the switches on the minion card. A controller cannot activate one of their own switches from an action roll on their minion, or vice versa. So this is very important because, hey, I just did a roll with a Gunjack and, oh, Fiddler switch. Well, you don't get to do Fiddler switch. You can do the Gunjack switch, but not Fiddler switch. So that is fairly important, I would say. Minions can be affected by states and can suffer damage, and are removed from the Hexadome when they suffer as much damage as their hit points. So, like a character in that regard. The fact that they can be affected by states is like, wow, wonderful. So I can immobilize them? Well, you could. Generally speaking, there's not a real purpose to that. Unless, of course, it can move, or you've got Valkyrie there and she just wants the bonus. But you could dazzle them. That could be useful for the Vulcan gunjacks. Similarly, if you minus movement at this time isn't a useful thing for them. So there's something to think about. Kind of counterintuitively, yeah, you could poison a minion, which might make sense later on. Say if there's a biological based minion that comes out. It is a little thematically weird that you could poison a robot, but these are the prices we pay for our games. So next important thing is minions cannot benefit from cover. I'm assuming it basically means, hey, they're not smart enough to, which is totally fine. But since they do not benefit from cover, that does make them a little squishier, even with good positioning. During the controller states rep, all blue side-up tokens on their minion cards are removed, and then all red side-up state tokens are flipped. So, pretty normal, something you would normally expect to do. Minions may have attributes, like a character, that let them make face-to-face rolls if their controller wants. For an example, if a minion has the Brawl attribute, or Brawn attribute, it can force a disengage roll. If the minion has a defense attribute, it may roll for defense when it is the target of an attack. This is very important and is a great way to actually get a little extra mileage out of your minions, because they are something that your opponent will want to clear up, and attacking Aristeia isn't necessarily a safe thing. So, no, this is a good thing, and since you can pump it up with tactics cards, so much the better. Now, that being said, minions are part of the team of the controller, and so they are considered allies, though they are not characters. You'll want to keep that in mind when it comes into the wording of various abilities or tactics. So, you want, if it's for allies, friendly allies, hey, it works. If it's for enemies, well, they're enemies. Which actually goes into the next step. Enemy characters' minions are considered enemies for all purposes, though they are not characters. And again, this is one of those semantic things that you'll want to keep in mind. And of course, we're going to end off with minions that have been removed from the Hexadome are placed to the side, ready to be deployed again. And this ties into the limit of minions that controllers have. So, if you have Gaia, she has 3 minions out, one gets destroyed, well, it goes back to her, and she can deploy another minion as a result, because, well, she has 2 instead of her maximum of 3, as long as, the requirements are met. So this is the super quick, super overview of the minions rules. As always, go to aristeiagame.com. They will have listings of all the rules, errata, FAQs, that sort of thing. And that is a great thing to keep in mind as we talk about Master of Puppets coming right up.